All right, well, let me welcome you today to the Kanban Experience in Project Management. We're going to be talking about Kanban today. And so when we look at the topic of Kanban, Kanban's kind of an interesting situation because there's an element of a framework or methodology. And for the purpose of our webinar, I don't know that methodology is exactly the perfect term, but we're going to use that term today. It's more of a framework, but it's also a tool. And the way that most of us have been introduced to Kanban probably was through a tool because it's the Kanban boards that many of us have been exposed to. But there's a little bit more with Kanban, and what you're starting to see across the board in all of your agile methodologies is you're starting to see a blending of those agile methodologies. So you're starting to see agile, which is kind of like a pod of methodology or framework here, and then you see Scrum, which is a framework, and then of course now you're seeing Kanban. And so what you're starting to see, and of course some of you have seen the XP and the Crystal and all of these different pieces that had the agile pieces to it, and you're starting to see people kind of use bits and pieces of all of it. And I think that's kind of the real world of what we're going to see in some of these. Kanban's one of those that has really been influential in those areas. So let's define it first off. Kanban's not something new. I know a lot of times people are starting to use it because they're using the Kanban boards and they're starting to look at some of the methodology. But the biggest piece of this really seems to come in because it looks at trying to have a clear communication and to where you're not having to use software. And so that's the reason why you saw the Kanban board. But 50 years ago, people started realizing that they could actually have something that was low tech, high visibility. And of course, that's where the Kanban board came in. So it is common in software development, product development. Its principles are really timeless because it's been around for a while. But we're seeing Kanban really start framing into a lot of your agile umbrella or agile frameworks. And so that's where people have really been introduced to this. So it's usable. You could use Kanban even in traditional. We have a few people who are using parts of it, the Kanban board in particular, in traditional, just like you're really seeing it in any of the agile methodologies out there. So Kanban is highly transparent. It's an engaging method for running a project because it focuses on the visibility. What do we mean? If you're unfamiliar with the Kanban board, it is a board, and we're going to show you some samples here this morning. But it's a board that you would literally walk up to, and it could be just a regular post-cork board on a wall where it shows what's in the process, what we're doing today, what's already finished. And so it allows you to be able in a split second to get a good idea of the project, or if it was a Kanban board of projects of all the overlapping projects. So it focuses really on a successful method such as real-time, low-tech, high visibility. And that is really its anchors. So once again, real-time, low-tech, high visibility. But the downside that we have with it a lot of times is that people are not keeping the boards updated, or the board is always lagging behind what's happening with the project. Of course, that's a downside, as you know, with all of our methodologies as far as who's tracking this stuff, and I'm sure I'm singing to the choir here. But it's commonly used as a Kanban board. It's placed in a public area. Kanban is known as a pull system, and I'm going to explain that a little bit here because almost all of your agile or many of your agile methodologies really focus on that. So it's looked at as a pull system for completing work, and that's part of the lean methodology. And so that pull system means that your team is really pulling work that they want to work on rather than having work pushed on them, which we see in traditional project management, where I have purposely called on you or given something to you to work on, and instead you're volunteering for it and you're wanting that pull system. So let's look at a little bit of the history that we're talking about of Kanban. Kanban actually goes all the way back to the 1940s. It was originally, many people know it as the card you can see, or the graphic card system, because of the cards are spread out on a board and we move them manually, those type of things. Some organizations have actually gotten to such a point where they actually have electronic boards, and so they can be kind of fancy with it. But the point is, it's at high visibility and low tech to where people are not having to look into a piece of software to see how the project's been running. It has been used in reference to inventory control, software design, we see it like crazy, and product development, as well as a tool to increase productivity, visibility, and performance. And I think the reason why we see that it's really helping with the avenue of performance, visibility, and performance, or productivity, visibility, and performance, is because there's an element of motivation there for you to be able to see how the project's progressing. The one thing, though, that I want to mention here that's a little different is that Kanban does not try to change everybody's position and role as some of the other agile methodologies. Kanban can be utilized using the exact same roles that everybody has, but they're bringing it under that umbrella of Kanban to where it's high productivity and low tech, to where we can see what's happening with the project. And so I'll refer to that in a moment. So Kanban benefits, some of the benefits, they focus on doing DOD, definition of done, MVP, minimum viable product. And so this is the reason why when we use this in product development, software design, any of these pieces, obviously that fits very well. Any of your Agile and Scrum components automatically fit with this, because the definition of done, minimum viable product, would be the minimum amount of features that would be part of that product or that software for the customer to be happy with that. And so with Kanban, you're functioning from a prioritized piece of work, very much like you do in Scrum, but the focus of this is that your people are being able to run that without having to use sprints, iterations, or milestones if they choose to. And so as you research Kanban, you'll see that people could be working on something for a lot longer than a 4 or 8 week sprint time would be. They could be working on it for 13 weeks, but they're finishing that one piece of component and then handing it off either for testing or for customer review or whatever. And so the thing is that the thought is that rather than breaking up, they're working that piece across as a whole. And so that's if you're doing pure Kanban. Now there's all kind of variations of all these pieces. You know what I'm talking about with Scrum and Agile, everybody's kind of doing hybrid kind of things with it. But in true Kanban, that's how you wouldn't violate the roles and responsibilities, and you would work on something as long as you need to finish that piece. The idea and benefit of a Kanban is that the thought is that there's fewer bottlenecks that reduce the productivity. Metrics are displayed in public places. That's the Kanban board we were referring to. And customers receive continuous delivery of completed features. And of course, that's what we were talking about, that has that agile flavor to it, because the customer is getting something quickly, but they still have the ability to make some adjustments and some changes, just like you would in any of the other agile methodologies. So just to kind of make sure I kind of summarize that piece, Kanban is kind of two things. We've got the methodology that has some loose rules and regulations of keeping the same roles that the company has used, people being in a pull system to be able to pull the work they want to work on, and they can work on it until it's finished, rather than having to feel like they've got to do it in sprints, iterations, or something like that. And on the other side, it functions very much as a tool, because that's primarily the Kanban board for communicating. So it's used with other methods that we know of, because it's very common in Scrum and other agile methodologies, and it's created for transparency. So if I can look at that Kanban board, I can know what's going on. And if you don't use this and you start using this, you'll be surprised how your people know what's happening. We can go into a company, I can go into a new company, and if they're using Kanban board with any kind of agile methodology, not just with Kanban itself, I can look at the board and have a good understanding of what's happening with that project and what should be being finished at some point in time. So let's talk about the pull and push system that we just referred to, because Kanban is a pull system, okay? A push system is very much what we understand in traditional project management. There's a demand for the product or service. It's forecasted early on. We have a future anticipation of when we're going to finish something. And so push does not limit the work in progress. And so what we're looking at here is that all the work is out there and people start working on whatever they're needs to be worked on, or whatever's been assigned. And so they began doing whatever the schedule says they're supposed to do next.
So
and so they begin producing a lot of those things. And so let's look here. We've got some things on. Here we go. Let me see if there's anybody else on. And so that's what we're looking at when we see that, is that the work has been pushed on, people have been assigned to the work, but it doesn't limit work in progress. And of course, if you're not familiar with the WIP, work in progress, the purpose behind that is that we should only be working on the most important work at all times, the most important features, the most important project, and so forth. And so rather than working on 10 or 15 different projects, like some of you I know do in real life, we get caught into that situation to where our time is been spread apart. And so work in progress means that we're only working on those most important things. Now let's flip that for a moment. So if we flip it and we get over here and we look at it from the aspect from a pull system, the pull system is the exact opposite. Your people are wanting to work on a certain piece of it. They're wanting to have that particular piece of work. So the demand for the product or services happens when the customer wants the product or service, not when we push it on them. And the pull limits the work in progress so that the worker works on the most important thing at all times. And the other thing that's pull is they're pulling the work in. They want to work on that particular piece. So there's a couple of components of this I think is kind of interesting. On the push side, it consistently has the product on hand for the customer when they choose to purchase it. That would be an example. Inventory would be high because they have to have the product on hand for you to come pick it up. It can have a consistent level of product or inventory level, and so that's been looked at as in the lean eyes through the push system. On the pull side, the product is created when the customer purchases it, inventory is low, and the pull gives flexibility and less waste. And so I don't know if you know this, but one of the things that's happening right now on some books at Amazon is actually using a pull system in some of their books. And so I don't know how they have decided which books do this, because not all of them are doing this, but many of the books are not created until you order it. I don't know if you know that. And so when you order the book, they actually have have purchase machinery to be able to create that book, and then that book is shipped to you. And if they're not doing it, one of the authors are doing it, because I know for sure that some of the books are not being created until that day. And so if you pick up a paperback book, just like any kind of paperback, so let's just say a regular paperback, you've ordered it from Amazon and the machine actually makes it that day, and then it ships for you. And so that's one of the things that we will see that's happening. That's a pull system, no waste. It's not sent to you until it actually happens. Now, all their books obviously are not like that, but I think it's interesting that many of the organizations are going in that direction. On the push system, the project begins in the order assigned. It can change based on shifting priorities. The highest priority today does not necessarily mean the highest priority tomorrow, as we can, if I had all the speakers on, I could hear amen right here, because I know you guys are changing priorities all the time. On the pull side, though, the project begins when the work in progress allows it to begin based on the priority and the resource availability for that high priority piece of work. The priority today remains until the project's finished, because we're working on the highest priority project until it's finished all the time. So we always are going in that direction. On the push side, just to give you an example, I thought this was good. Black Friday, lines for checking out are not work in progress, and people stand in lines forever on Black Friday because of the purchasing. On the pull side of Black Friday, though, it's where shoppers rush to buy that unique item and get those unique deals. And so what we do is that's very much a pull system. People are just clamoring for those pieces. So if you've done any study in Lean and the Toyota production methods, you know what I'm talking about. There's a push and there's a pull, and the pull obviously is going to be much more motivational for your people. So how does Kanban actually work then? All right, so here's what we're looking at of how Kanban actually works. So you visualize the project, and so someone has had to do this, obviously. You create the work in progress limits, and so in other words, what is the next priority project we're working on? You follow the guidelines for the project policies, whatever it takes to be able to keep the limited amount of projects from coming down the pipeline, and then establish whatever the quantitative measurements are for that, and you identify improvement areas to be able to feed into that project so that you're constantly getting better. And that's that continuous improvement piece. So all of these components are part of what we're looking at when we talk about Kanban, and which is beyond just the board. This is a little bit more of that framework that you could be using. So let's talk just a moment about the piece of visualizing. It's a process that forces the viewer to begin at the starting point, walk through each step, Visualizing the process step by step surfaces waste, waiting time, inefficiencies, and we might not be aware of that. Also, visualizing the process opens the door for aligning the process with the current way of doing business. And so what you're trying to do, obviously, is build something that's going to be supportive of where you're going as a company or as an organization. That's why you're doing the most important projects. Remember, your projects are driving some strategic piece of the goal or some strategic plan, part of the strategic plan in all times. That's the reason why you're doing a project, is it's supposed to be driving one of those goals. And so this just helps align it that much more. Now, visualization of the work for the project includes Kanban moves the project from keeping information in software that only a few individuals can see to a large board placed in a prominent area. Now, that builds not only low-tech, high visibility, but it builds accountability. Why? Because everybody and his dead dog can see this board, so they know what's going on. And so you'll see managers, you'll see executive management walk through, and they'll glance at that board throughout the day. And they're not asking for a report from anybody. They're not attending some crazy meeting or anything. They're just noticing what's happening with the board. So the Kanban board functions as an information radiator. And so most of you know that on the Agile side. And so to radiate communication, and that's what information radiator does. It's something in a public, it's something that's a low tech, high visibility. And so that's what a Kanban board really is an information radiator. And we can know what's going on. So visualization helps keep the essential items in the forefront. This is the most important thing that we should be working on. Now, the work in progress limits for prioritization. And this is difficult. Many of you guys will never be able to do this just because of the nature of your business that you're working in. Many of you have anywhere from 5 to 15 different projects on your plate. And so we'll talk about that because there's a downside to that. But many of you have a lot of plates in the air for this. So multiple projects are a common approach. This level of work keeps the project team busy, reduces free time to speed up a project or deal with a crisis. And that's a negative because many of you, if you do have a crisis on any of those 10 projects that you have, you end up killing the time and the effort on 1 or 2 of those projects while everybody kind of, swarms together to fix, put out the fire and fix the bleeding on that one project. And then, of course, that hurts all the other projects because we didn't work on that for 3 days. Work in progress purposely limits all project work to only the highest project, and team members work on that project until it's completed. So the idea here is your project's important, but your project's number 5. The project over here that I'm working on right now, that's project number 1. When project 1 gets finished, guess what we're going to? We're not going to 5, we're going to number 2. And so we're going to work in that progress. Now, limiting the work in progress helps keep the highest priority work in the flow. It supports the execution and working efforts of the workers rather than running to work on multiple projects of lesser priority. And it requires the coordination and support of management because management can't keep flipping what the priority is. And so we've all sat in those meetings, and this isn't a criticism of anybody. This is just kind of the real world, and I'm trying to keep it real. But we've all sat in those meetings with 5 or 6 projects, and we start asking questions, not having enough time, or worse yet, not having enough people. We start asking questions about priority, and we hear something that is the most brilliant statement that all 10 of our projects are number 1. And we all know that that's one of the worst things that can be said to any of us, because if all 10 are number 1, that means it's left up to the team to decide which one they're wanting to work on, or all of them are looked at equal value. And that's not what this does. This does the opposite. This allows management to manage those projects from a priority standpoint, which you're wanting them to do, and your workers will work their buns off to try to work and get that project out the door if they understand it's number 1. But so many times they're all treated equal, and so now what happens is that they might not be working on the most important. WIP only moves to the next project or activity after the previous one is fully complete. This sets limits and prioritizes the future work, so it's evident when the prioritized work is complete. We're done with it. Our team is done with it, and we're not changing hats. I don't know if you guys have noticed how your people have to change gears. We're working on this project, so we're really focused on this thing. We're in the risk area, and so here we go. And then now we're over here, and here we're trying to schedule everything out and estimate time. And so now we're having to change hats to estimate time. Okay, so now over here we're in testing. So now we're in the testing mode for everything. And so what happens is there's always that downtime to where your people have to kind of energize or rearrange what they're doing for each of these 5 projects. And many of you guys are doing this every day, checking on your project every day are going to a meeting every other week about some of these different projects. So you're always changing gears. WIP keeps the capacity levels of the project team within acceptable limits. Right now, there seems to be a turnover of project team members and project managers because people are so swamped with so many projects, and we have such a skeleton crew at our organization that people are starting to churn. And so they might, if you're in a government situation, they might not leave the government, but they're leaving you. And so that's still bad. So they're going someplace else. And so that's one of the pieces that you're looking at. So this feeds us into capacity. And I thought this was a great statement here. And I pulled it from Connor, and he had written about capacity. And here's what he said: it is the maximum number of requirements, story points, user stories a person can produce during their workday, work schedule, or time period. Capacity is sabotaged when people push additional projects or work and overload the team. This level of sabotage can hurt all projects and demotivate the team. And yet you guys are dealing with this, I know, all the time, because people, and I'm not saying there's not going to be emergency projects, and I'm not saying there's not going to be crisis. Most of us accept that is the real world of project management. But sometimes we've got silly stuff happening where we can't do the most important because we're doing what somebody else is giving to us as, quote, urgent at that particular moment. So here's what we're really talking about to kind of summarize this part. Work in progress. Over here to the left, this is our working time. So let's say we've got 100 hours to be able to work on projects, okay? That's how long we're here. So that's our total amount of working time per person. So if we look over here at this second thing, project number one, the amount of time the person works on the project. So I've got how much I'm working on it compared to the other time. And so now we're going to add another project. So what happens here? So here we look at another one. And so number two, you notice what happens. Well, what happens by the time I get to project number three? The more projects one's working on, the less time that person has to work on projects. Why? How many times have you thought to yourself, I can't do anything on the project because I'm attending all of these crazy meetings, or I'm giving a report, or I'm having to do something, and it's always something that's not advancing the project. It's communication, and obviously that's important. But the point is, we feel like we're wasting our time over here with busy work stuff rather than getting the project out. The Kanban board should help with some of the communication, but obviously it's not going to help depending on your culture and depending on what are the requirements of your organization for some of these. All right, so let's go beyond the work in progress. So Kanban and making policies explicit. Explicit policies connect to the previous item of work in progress. So the policies they're talking about here are the purposeful restrictions of what projects we're going to start working on. Just because somebody wants a project in the pipeline might not, those policies would restrict allowing it to be in the pipeline until it's the next priority. So it has to be clear on how much work a project team can work on, when the team can add additional work. That's the policy. We're ready to add another project. So we've got 6 weeks left on project A, and so now we can start attending a few meetings on project B, but project A has to go out before we actually start work on project B. Preliminary meetings are fine, but not the actual work. And then Kanban supports that lean mindset, that pull system to increase performance, and those policies have to have those restrictions. And we can't be turning the policies on and off here of deciding, okay, well, now we're going to follow policy. Oh, well, this came from the big person, and so now we've got to do, we're going to allow that one to happen. You've got to be able to follow that all the way through. So that feeds into managing workflow. It includes steps for completing the work. Sometimes the workflow is the various aspects of the Kanban board. The Kanban board is used for tracking the features, user stories, or story points from the beginning to the end. It can include the various sections such as to do, progress, and finish. And I'm going to show you a couple of different styles so that you've got a good understanding if you've never looked at a Kanban board before. So Kanban and implementing feedback loops. Feedback loops in Kanban focuses on creating and pushing that continuous improvement that we referred to earlier. Within the project. So the idea is that we're doing our work, but we're also trying to continue to improve. And that's one of the reasons why people run projects as well, is that we're taking something to a better level or a higher level of performance or higher level of quality. Feedback loops can be a process or a cycle to give feedback on performance or quality. And the input must always be constructive, though, as we start giving input on how we can be better. Feedback loops can surface wrong metrics, poor communication, inept decision making, which could be changed. And so the thing is that where is that communication stopping? We try to communicate, so we send out emails and we have meetings and this, and we still have this barrage of wrong information or misunderstood. 3 people sat in the same meeting and we all thought that they said something different. And so that's what we're talking about here. So we've got to be able to get that communication going and stronger there. The other piece of this is the guidelines for project policies. Kanban follows specific project policies for completing the task or project, creating the policies that make sense on one project, but having flexibility to not use that same policy maybe on another project, and then communicating the limited policies helps set expectations and steps to follow. Now, one of the big things that's happening, I think you're seeing it probably as well, is that people are wanting flexibility. What we do on one project might not be what we think is going to be successful on the next one. And so the ability to flex with those projects and maybe even some of those policies for how we do certain types of projects is going to be a piece of it. And that's one of the reasons why we're moving so strongly into that hybrid arena, to where we're running this section very strong, maybe traditional with waterfall, and we're running this section over here real loose with agile, because we've got a lot of change and a lot of flexibility. And so if you're not experiencing pieces of this, you probably will in the next 24 months, because that's where it's going. So establishing quantitative measurements. Obviously, we've got to measure, whether you're working agile or traditional, you've got to be able to measure this. So quantitative measurements help the team know precisely where the project performance is at any time. But our measurements might be different from running a traditional project, and we might be measuring something totally different. Quantitative measurements are supported because the team will not create new work until the work in progress is complete. So I'm not working on project B until project A is finished. And so generalized measurements and guesstimates are not allowed in Kanban. It's not complete until it's complete. So giving percentages is what Kanban has a tendency not to want to do. I'm 70% done with this. Now, if we're talking in the team and I'm a programmer and I say I think I'm 70% done, that's fine. But we're talking about the way we're reporting this information upline is really what we're talking about with some of this. So the idea is that you're going to improve and evolve with using Kanban. So rather than shifting the paradigm instantly and changing things, Kanban is built on past historical successes and evolves into something new. Now, this is one of really the big key. And so let me focus on this for just a second with Kanban. Scrum has certain rules that make it Scrum. Many of your agile methodologies have that. Kanban is focused on allowing change to happen. As you know, projects create change. And the reason why people put project management into play is because they want the project to create and drive a certain type of change. So many times that's why people will do it, is because they want drastic change in 8 or 16 weeks or whatever it is. Kanban uses the same roles, same responsibilities. So we're not having to bring in a different role or teach somebody or call somebody something different, same roles. But the thing is, they're not really trying to drive massive change like some of the other methodologies. They're going to let change happen in a more gradual sense. So you can see why some people would be interested in Kanban, and they know change is going to happen, but it's a slower type of change rather than here's how we did it yesterday, and 6 weeks later we're doing something absolutely opposite. So you can see in those situations where change needs to be a little slower. So it allows experimentation to try new things without the fear of failure, and because you're allowing the change to happen at a more gradual pace, then a lot of times this is more acceptable, especially to management and the employees, than some of the sweeping paradigm shifting kind of change that we see. So it also includes identifying improvement areas. Kanban includes improvement from continuous improvements of the team and the project. It's a methodology. It can work more than work in manufacturing inventory control. It can streamline project processes. And so what you're doing, you're looking to see, can we continue to evolve and get better all the time? What can we improve? It could be improving our processes. It could be improving our outputs. But the point is, you and your team are looking at how to make this a little bit better. So if we're looking at Kanban processes, so let's look at it from this aspect. So completing the project work with Kanban, we know it's prioritized. We're working on one project. So you've got your product backlog created by the customer, the PM, or the manager, because any of those could be the one working on that. And so you got your work in progress backlog to complete. And so you've got your team estimates, the work in progress duration. And so your team still estimates the work. And so then what you would do is, so for the product backlog, features prioritized, features are placed in sequence, and they're given to the team. And so we work on all of those pieces. And then if you look down here at the team is creating the estimates. They're creating, and they commit to the work in scope, which is going to be work in progress for the scope, which is going to be the one project. And so all of those components come together very well. And then if you look at the backlog to complete, the work in progress, that's the projects that's in the pipeline that haven't even started. And so to help clarify the priorities, you're looking at the definition of done, and then you're validating the definition of done. And the definition of done is going to align to a priority out here. Now, that might not be something your team does. I'm sorry, excuse me, let me grab something to drink real quick. That might not be something your team prioritizes. That might be solely management, and that's okay. Because see, you're not getting rid of management. You're not getting rid of any of that authority. The management can have that. And you're just working on the next project that comes that way. Thank you. All right. So where to use Kanban? Well, Kanban, obviously it's used in software like crazy, but you're seeing it in product development, but you're also seeing that Kanban is coming in that hybrid sense where people are using components of Kanban to be able, where they think they can get a better efficiency. So in software product development, it helps improve development processes, assists in working on the right process at the right time. So if we're doing process improvement, then we think that this is going to give us efficiency by using the Kanban boards, and I'm not changing anybody's role. Everybody's role is the same, but we're trying to work on those efficiencies and limit the work in progress, then that's going to be very advantageous to us. So what about construction? People are experimenting with all the agile methodologies and really coming up with more of a hybrid on some of these. And so let's just face off with a couple of these and just kind of give you a couple of ideas here. Construction projects, 99% of the time, are traditional. Why is that? Because it's past history. We've done it 15 times. And so, we've poured 5,000, 5,000 footings. And so this footing is going to be just like the other footings. Okay. So construction has a tendency to be traditional. However, we are so high tech with everything inside the building. That's where you start seeing your agile methodologies come together, because high tech video, all the electronic feeds, all those type of things. So the Kanban methodology would not benefit this type of project in general. However, tools could benefit this. So in other words, do a construction project, we might have Kanban boards. That's beneficial for communication, low tech, high visibility that could do this. So here's what we're talking about. So this is just a construction Kanban board. So even if you don't do a lot of other stuff, just the communication of this. And so what we're working on today, what's in progress right now, and what is yet to be, what's already done behind us. And so you're seeing people who come up with some simplified board to be able to keep this going. Of course, this has changed every day as stuff gets finished out of progress. It's over on the done side, and new work is loaded into progress. And so as a supervisor, and I could be a supervisor and we're using this, I'm walking by and I'm looking to see what's in the progress and what's finished. And I know where we are in that project. So, but generally construction is going to lean toward the traditional side. Let's look at sales for a moment. So sales Kanban focuses on sales process, moving the sales process toward picking up new customers, and ultimately not just working with the prospects, but making them into customers. So sales can use Kanban to show the progress in a simple and even non-technical manner. And so they allows them to be able to see everyone in progress here. So here's a real simple example of that. So we've got a to-do list of all the things we're trying to do, and we've got prospects to contact. So we've got a list of prospects. And so here's the prospects we've contacted, and here's the customers that we've created from this group. So if I was a sales manager and we're using Kanban, and you guys were my sales team, you men and women were my sales team, I could walk past and see what's happening to your board, and we haven't said a word. I've looked at your board and I can see what's going on. And obviously, as more people become customers, we've got more prospects that I've contacted who are actually in that pot. And so it allows you to be able to visually see some of that. But that's just the Kanban board part, but that is one of the very popular pieces. So differences between Scrum and Kanban boards. Now, I don't know if you know there's a difference between these. And to be honest with you, if I saw that you were using it the opposite way, I could care less as long as I understand what you're saying on the board. But really, technically, there's a little bit of a difference. And so let me just tell you the difference. And if you're using it successfully and you're doing it differently, who cares? Okay. But for the purpose of education, here's what it is. So a Scrum board, sometimes called is kind of a combination of a Kanban board and a Scrum board. And many people will have these type of boards. It focuses more on the processes. So the Scrum board is talking about the processes, where the work is in the process, more so than communication of other things. Now, there's not anything wrong with this. I mean, this can be very beneficial to you. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that's really a Scrum board. And sometimes people will have a Scrum board of where we are in the process, and they'll have a Kanban board to communicate where they are on the actual work of what they're doing in the process, if that makes sense. And then some obviously will do both. And so if you compare the two, a Scrum board focuses on one iteration at a time, connects the work with the role one plays, does not allow additional work to be added during the sprint by the team, and it's time boxed along with the sprint. So time box, is where we encompass something with time. So if something is we want it done in 4 weeks, you have a 4-week time box. And so a lot of times you'll see the Scrum boards have this because once again, they're running Scrum. And so you'll see them set their board up like this. And that Kanban board normally focuses on the work to be completed. It doesn't change the roles if you're using pure Kanban. I don't have to change the roles. You're not a Scrum Master. You could be my project manager, or you're not the product owner. I can call you customer, and I'm okay with all those. It allows additional work to be added by the team anytime they need. There's no time box unless the time box benefits the effort of the team, and the team decides it. So the time box, there's no time box because we're working on that one piece until it's finished, and I'm not fighting for time to work on this project against the other 5 that I'm working on, because we're only working on the one at a time. So a simple IT Scrum board could be, I've got stories, here's what I'm doing today, here's what's in the progress, here's where we are in testing, and here's what's done. And so this focuses a little bit more on the process, but it doesn't have to. And like I said, if you're using a Scrum board with a combination of these two and it's working for you, God bless you, use it, because that you're wanting something that's successful, and the hybrids is really where most things are going. So if you were starting with Kanban, so it's not complicated, as you can see. Project managers or teams can begin right where you are right now. And so that you could bring out a Kanban board and set it up to where you start tracking some of those things. That's going to take a little while for your people to get used to looking at the board, but you'll notice that when they go to grab coffee, they'll look at that board and see what's happening with some of the people. You can anticipate the team and organization will evolve from the current usage of it to something a little different. Follow the current roles, responsibilities. You're not changing titles. You're not changing roles in the team meetings. Everybody is still, if you're a technical lead, I can still call you a technical lead. And you encourage input from all the organizational levels on the progress and changes needed. And so the point is, it's sometimes a little more inclusive and not as restrictive on what the terms are or what the roles are in particular. So here's some best practices for Kanban. So it works best in making the current process or system normally better. It does not help transition major change, but it can help one-track progress. And so you'd probably use Scrum or one of the other type of methodologies if you're trying to have sweeping change and control that change through iterations or sprints. You probably are going to go more in the direction of Scrum or something like that. Kanban does align with and use Lean, Agile, and Scrum principles for pieces of it in many of the areas and delivering work incrementally, but yet you're not locked into using sprints in Kanban. You're working on it all the way through, so I don't have to use an iteration or a sprint. And it does not give power to the team, but keeps a person in charge. And that's one piece I wanted to make sure of. In Scrum, the team is really driving everything. And here, the team can drive it if that's beneficial, but I can still have a project manager overseeing that project who's accountable for the project, and they're working directly with that project manager. And so that project manager has the power for yes and no. I could still have a sponsor who has power for yes and no, and my team is still functioning with a lot of the agile flavor that's there. The evolutionary change we're talking about through Kanban, look at revolutionary and evolutionary. When we talk about revolutionary change, Scrum produces, and it's known for producing that revolutionary change by moving one method from a methodology to another quickly. Scrum makes changes, others sometimes resist it. And that's the reason why people want to use that, is because in those iterations or sprints, we are moving those changes from one thing to another quickly. Evolutionary change is a little bit softer approach, if that makes sense. So it produces evolutionary change, which takes time. It receives less resistance because I'm not going as fast with the change. It's not as drastic, okay? So when Kanban makes a change, the support is going to be high because others see the need, because guess what? We're only working on one project at a time. So everybody's pretty much on board as we do that, and it's much more methodical. I haven't violated anybody's roles or responsibilities. Everybody's still got their positions, you know, everybody's got that stuff. And so I've still got my project manager saying yes. I've got my sponsor saying yes. So I kind of have a little more support here, but we're not trying to make quite the sweeping changes. Now, just sure as I say that, you'll be working using Kanban and you guys are trying to make sweeping changes, maybe. And if that works for you, go for it. So the 4 principles of Kanban really kind of come down to this. Start with what you know and start using. What you know is go with a Kanban board, and you see tons of examples if you Google it to get the right columns that's going to fit your type of project, and you and your team can brainstorm how to wordsmith it. Agree to pursue change, and you are pursuing some change in how you communicate and methodology. And so one of the negative things about all project management is how bad communication is most of the time. And so even when we're trying to send everything out, we still seem to have these gaps. Try a Kanban board and see if that helps with that area. And if it does, then go ahead and expand it to include whatever it is you want to know about something. But don't get it so invested to where you're spending such a long amount of time trying to update that stupid board all the time. It needs to be low tech, high visibility, but it needs to be something fast. I mean, where we can move cards around and keep it updated very quickly and not invest, you know, you don't need 45 minutes to invest a board. And then respect the current roles. All the roles that are in place, we're using all of those. We're not trying to tell the project manager, now you've got power on this project, but on that project you don't. Project manager is still the project manager, sponsor still the sponsor. And then encourage acts of leadership. That doesn't mean I don't want my team stepping up to lead. Of course you do. Project managers really do want that co-leadership on so many of these things. So these are going to be some of your main principles of Kanban. Let me say one more time, Kanbans do not have to have iterations or sprints. Many never do. If you're assigned to work on this one piece of the project, you work on it for whatever duration it is to finish that piece. And so they can use sprints, they can use iterations, they can use milestones, but in most cases, they work without that. And so if it's working for you using iterations in Kanban, go for it. But if you're using milestones and it's working with Kanban, fine. But if you're not using any of those and somebody is just assigned to complete that piece of the project and your people are doing this, then that's awesome. You know, don't change for the sake of changing. So it focuses on completing work in progress set up by the manager, project manager, customer before moving to the next work in progress. And it's always prioritized. It's limited to what the team members can accomplish quickly. Now that mindset, let me just kind of give you one more encouragement. Agile, the reason we like the Agile and the Scrum and those type of methodologies is we're giving something to the customer quickly as fast as possible. Execution is king. So you want that same philosophy here. Execution is king. But at the same time, some of the restrictiveness that you maybe feel with some of these others might not be that. So let me show you one final thing here. So I could have my product backlog. Here's what we're working on, the items that are the definition of done. And so must have, should have, could have, nice to have, all of you use stuff like this. And then we could be executing and implementing. Here's the story, user stories, or here's the story points or the features. And then here's the things that we've already validated and been accepted. So we're being able to hand something off to the customer. So I might be doing all of this and yet I'm not running it in sprints or iterations. We're just being able to get those 3 features so the customer can can start playing around with those. And so the work in progress is limited until it's complete. So we get all those things in the backlog out the door, and then we'll be able to work on the next piece of work or the next project that the customer wants us to work on. And so work is not broken into milestones. It's not broken into sprints or iterations. The team works until they reach the definition of done, and then they hand that off to the customer. All right, so let's start with some questions here for just a moment. And so this is many of you use some kind of abbreviated fashion of something like this, if you, I bet you. So, but I'm willing to answer some questions if I can.
Hi, this is Dave. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this is Janine. Sorry. Have you found any applications that work well in our digital world? So we have teams, and I see some Kanban boards and different things like that. Since most of us are remote now, that work well. So does anybody have any suggestions for that?
That's a great question. Has anybody seen any suggestions for Kanban boards that are electronically, because people are all scattered all over the place working remotely? Anybody using something?
We use Jira. It's an Atlassian product. Jira has a built-in Kanban board visibility, so you might look into that. Jira.
That's
Jira.
The one that is named the most.
Yeah.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else? Anybody else have one? Okay. Other questions?
Keith, this is Dana.
Keith, I was gonna Go
I was
ahead.
just going to ask about reporting. So we are challenged with reporting, and we actually, because we do hybrid, so we have a project that starts out, it's definitely a start and an end date, so it's a waterfall, but embedded within that project, obviously, we will have development that's required as part of the solution. And we've discovered that we've been using a Kanban board, and we'd like that for tracking purposes. However, the challenge we've had, if we were to follow Kanban process, is that we've struggled with tracking it and reporting on that, even though we've estimated it. So we're doing lots of change management. Is there any recommendation on that from anybody else, or even yourself, on how we could better manage within a waterfall project? I know that sounds crazy, but if we, with that, I mean, are we doing the right thing using the change management all the time?
Well, change management depends. Once again, every hybrid is going to be a little different. I just, you know, the hybrid for your organization, your culture, and what your management needs might be a little different than my hybrid. And so your hybrid sounds like it's still trying to have strong control in the change control process. If I understood what you were saying, did I get that right? Is that really?
That is correct. Yes, everything that we do
okay.
has to be paid for, tracked, communicated out clearly to the client. Yes,
it's got to be paid for. Yeah, I mean that was the long and short of it. That's the truth of it. Okay, so that piece is real heavy for your type of hybrid project, and so that means it's going to feel a lot more like your waterfall kind of stuff. And so, you know, what you're doing might be the best that you can do because of some of those characteristics. And it's not a wrong thing or a bad thing. It's just the way it is for that hybrid. Where a different hybrid, they might not have that strong change control process. The team and the customer might be able to do that. But let's open it up and let's see. Anybody have any suggestions based on this situation that you've been exposed to? Anybody? No? Okay, here's a couple of things just to think about. And so I don't know if this would fit or help or whatever. Make sure that what you're tracking or what you're using with Kanban is you've got the most important things on your board that people are tracking. The second thing is talk to management about the change control process. If it has to be exactly that way, how fast can you get them together for when those changes happen? And and because once again, speed is what you're trying to do, and delivery is part of that. So we'll look at those two things and see if that doesn't kind of help smooth some of that out. Anytime you're using a hybrid is, you have that clumsiness with hybrid. And so what happens is, because you've got the two systems coming together, and we're trying to be true to either one. And the thing is that it's not being true to either one. You're kind of taking like a smorgasbord, you're taking components of both because you like both to put them together, but there's always going to be that clumsy that clumsy area. And one part of that is always going to be that communication, reporting those metrics. And so it might help for you to have a meeting just to talk about what is a way we can report these metrics that fits us for speed, but fits management for filling in the box, and fits the customer to where they feel comfortable for it. It sounds like that topic there needs to be talked about, and then kind of make that process, and you might have to draft a certain report, a type of report for that.
I like that. Those are good ideas. Thank you.
Let me see here. I've got some folks who popped up on chat here who let me see here. So on chat, is there a way to reflect dependencies between tasks A needs to be done before B in the Kanban board? I guess you could do it. You could do a board, more of a Scrum board, showing the process of something if there was benefit for that. I don't know that I've seen that. Normally I've seen reporting boards, but you have flexibilities. If that's going to bring value to your project, then you and your team could talk about it. And this was Jim that said this, Jim. And so you and your team could talk about it and see, okay, what kind of value would that bring, and kind of design your own board. Has anybody seen a reflecting of dependencies with your activities? A needs to be done before B. I've seen it in a list, because your prioritized list of features, but I don't know about activities, but I think they would have similarities. Who else?
Keith, I was trying to speak earlier, but I was muted. I use Planner, Microsoft Planner, which is available through Teams, at least through us. But within that, I can show dependencies for each card. I will show dependencies. It's essentially a list, like you said, but it shows, I can put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these are the ones that we work on in that order. So now beyond that, you can't get too much more complicated than that on Planner, but that's a situation that I use.
Well, that's good. And you're not wanting it to be too complicated, because you're wanting your people to flesh it out when they get it. You just want to make sure that's a chunk of the pie they need to work on next. So that's good. Anybody else have an idea? Tom said Microsoft Planner for Kanban. Thank you. And all right, any other questions? Well, let me mention two quick things to you real quick here, if you don't mind. And so let me show you two things here. We have created something that we tested it, and this thing has really worked out well. We are doing what's called it's a free, first off, and it's I'm calling it a 5-day. For people who are wanting to pass the PMP, it's called a PMP Mastermind Group. So it doesn't teach them test questions and all of this necessarily, but what it does, it helps them understand what the PMP process is. It helps them fill out their application. And so it's like an hour a day for 5 days. They get 5 contact hours for it. They participate in two Zoom calls that week. I do 2 Zoom calls live so people can ask questions. They get a memory chart for passing the PMP. They get some sample PMP questions, vocab test. All of this is current with the current changes with PMI right now, with the new test. And so we do this for free. So they do 5 days. We have discussion boards, videos, a lot of different pieces to where they understand the PMP. So we've got 2 more left. And so we tested this, and this has just turned out to be, I think on the list, I think there's 95 already signed up for the one in May. And so if this would benefit you or some of your people that don't have the PMP, it kind of helps calm their nerves too, to get them into the PMP for May and September. Those will be the last 2 there. And then the last piece I just want to talk about here real quick is the hybrid project management. We wrote this over the winter, and we have just finished this. This is 2 days, and so we still have some dates open from August until December, that we could actually do this on site. I'm willing to do it on site, or we can do it virtual. And so anyway, this is where we actually are looking at hybrid project management. Now, listen, when we talk about hybrid for this course, the way I've presented it is not just using traditional and agile, but we've also gone at it from the aspect of support processes to be able to make this thing work. And so from researching this and looking at this over the last 4 years of people switching over to hybrid, this is where I think it's falling apart. And I'm not saying this in that way in your company maybe, but it seems like we're using traditional, we're using hybrid, but some of the support processes we're not using, and those support processes would make all of this easier. And so there are support processes that are part of this to be able to help this work, but there is no one size fits all. So this is a new program we've just come up with. It's 2 days long, and so we can do it virtual if this would help benefit your team, or I'll come on site and do something like that. And then webinar, the next webinar that's coming up in May is going to be PMBOK 7th edition overview. I don't know if you've seen the new PMBOK. I was going to show it to you, but I actually took it downstairs. The new PMBOK is about half the size of PMBOK 6. And of course, as you know, the PMP test does not focus on the PMBOK 7 so much anymore. They've taken that away as of 6, but 7 has really changed, and it's more of a handbook for everyone. And so we're going to do an overview of the comparisons between the two. And so this will be, that's what we'll be talking about next month. And so we already have a bunch of people who've already signed up for this. And then we've got 4 more boot camps left, and we're doing all of these virtual. The passing rate is about 95% first time passing rate, 99.9 out of 3. If those of you, those who have not taken the PMP test in the past, or if they have tried it and didn't pass, this is a good time. We think the PMP test with the new material is probably the best it has ever been. It's not like it has been. It's much more, a little bit more logical. So those who have struggled with it in the past, we have 4 more left this year for them to be able to jump in. So that kind of takes you through that part there. And I think that was it here. So any last minute questions before I get out of here and let you go? Okay, well, let me thank you so much for being on our call today and being part of this. And so I hope you have a wonderful week as we get ready to switch over to spring, if it'll ever come. So thank you guys so much for being part of this, and I'll see you next month. Okay, bye everybody. God bless you. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Keith.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Keith. Bye-bye.
Thank you.